A couple of videos ago I made a video about protests where I shared my opinion about them, how I'm not really satisfied with this idea of need to protest and how I think that they don't influence much in our life. Since then my opinion changed a little bit due to some of conversations that I had with some people around me. And today I want to share you this small change in my perspective. Let's start. But obviously before we begin I have to tell you that this is Yury Experience and here I share my various experiences about different topics. I do 2 videos per week, Mondays and Thursdays. If you will enjoy this video, please drop a like, you can also subscribe to the channel. Let's go! I will provide you 4 examples of different protests that I know a bit about. During the process I will share with you my opinion about these protests, and some of these opinions will overlap with the previous video, others will go a little bit beyond it. And we start with protests due to Israel-Palestinian conflict. There were a lot of protests, for example, against it last year, and I'm pretty sure there is some kind of repetition since around 2000s. So some period of time there are protests against this conflict. Except for some countries which are directly connected with the conflict, Israel, Palestine, the countries around Israel, different Arabic countries, most of the other countries are kinda jumping on a hype wave. There is some conflict and we have to participate in a conversation about it. But I still have to see a protest around that ideology that actually made a change, that actually made a difference, because now everybody forgot about it already and it is something like half a year since the last wave of protests and nobody cares anymore. These kinds of protests I don't get, although I do get them because people love to participate in like big movements, doing something for fairer world, but at the end of the day they don't care. This opinion basically aligns with my opinion from the previous video. People don't really care about it because they don't live in Israel, they don't live in Palestine, so they can allow themselves to not care, and they just do so as if they care. So they are going to the protest, and then a couple of months later you ask them, where were you like a couple months ago, and they will not be able to tell you that they were at a protest or what they protested for, because it didn't matter. We go a level higher, a level closer to the one that I respect. BLM protests I also mentioned in my previous video about protests, and I also don't think that these protests were useful in any way. Maybe I'm too far from American politics and news, but based on my knowledge, the target that they achieved as a BLM protest wave was to bring policemen to justice who participated in killing of Mr. Floyd. But except for that, the whole idea of reforms, the whole idea of funding, forgotten. Obviously there are people who didn't forget about it, there are people who are in this bigger idea of BLM movement, but a lot of people who posted black squares on their Instagram page forgot about it already. So this protest wave achieved something. I wouldn't say it didn't achieve anything, but in comparison to what it tried to achieve, in comparison to what it needs to achieve, it's nothing. It's almost close to nothing. Next example, Fridays for Future. And here I'm even closer to a respectable level of protest. And the reason for it is it kinda make a change. Not completely, but it kinda made a change. Ecology is a big topic. It's obviously a big topic for all of us because climate change, in my personal opinion, is real. Climate change is something that we have some influence on. More about it in a video later in a couple of weeks. And Fridays for Future were part of this power that brought attention of various people to these problems of ecology and these problems of climate change. Politicians, big companies are now talking about ecology. More and more businesses are working towards being like having no climate influence, having no ecology influence, being completely clean and whatnot. Is it good? I think yes, but I don't think it is enough. More about it again in a different video. Currently it is a hype. It is cool to be green. It is cool to not influence ecology badly. And again, it is also subsidized by a lot of countries, not all of them, but some of them. Did Fridays for Future protests actually make a big change? In my personal opinion, no. They did something. I wouldn't say that they didn't do anything. They did something, and it is something that is comparably big, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that they solved some problems or they brought enough attention or they made a huge step in the right direction. I don't think so. I do think that people care for their survival, care for ecology, care for the state of Earth, but for different reasons that Fridays for Future make it to appear. So it is a good thing, it achieved something, but to say that this protest was actually very successful and we did something, like something big, and now the whole world watches us, no. Europe at its best, maybe USA, but that's pretty much it. The last example is not very peaceful, and yes, all of the mentioned protests were not always peaceful too, but this one, yes, it is a revolution. It started as a peaceful protest, but then after some time it developed itself to the revolution, to something big. And I am talking about Ukrainian revolution in 2014. And it started as a peaceful protest against the political decision of the president at that time. Mostly students participated in that protest, in the peaceful part of it, but then at some point police came and hit them and made them move away from the location where they were staying, where they were protesting. And after that, shit hit the fan. After that, hell lot of people from the whole country came to the location with the intention to stay there and to protest current decision, current political decision making, current presidency, basically. It is tragic, but some people were killed during the process, some people died during the process, and they didn't have to die. Part of these killings were decisions, conscious decisions of different powers that were behind the situation on both sides. But they made a change. They made a real change. After that, the political situation in Ukraine changed. I can't say whether it was for better or for worse, but during that moment, people believed that the new stuff was better. And currently, I'm kinda, based on my knowledge of Ukraine, I think it was for the better. Do I want to inspire you to start a revolution? No, please, no, it is not the video about that. But what I want to tell you that protests rarely achieve something big, something that they actually want to achieve, something that they shout on the streets. On a lot of occasions, protests are just shouting, just it. And to be fair, not everywhere you are even allowed to do that. But in a lot of countries you are allowed to go on the streets, to go to protest something, to try to make a change, but does anything happen? In my opinion, yes, something does happen, but I just don't want to overestimate the power of a protest. Most of peaceful protests just end with achieving something, maybe a little bit, but not very much. At the moment protests become less peaceful, they can achieve more, but on the other hand, they can be demonized. And that's what we also saw during BLM times, where we saw rioting, and a lot of people who were participating in the BLM protests were demonized by media, by politicians, by whatnot, because there were rioting people in their group. Which leads me to the conclusion, I still don't believe in protests much. I think it is a good thing to bring the attention. I think it is a good thing to try at least to bring people to think about something. But I still don't think it is a good tool for making big changes, for making big steps, for bringing people to make a change. I at least didn't experience it at the moment. If you have different experience, you can obviously write it down, but as long as something wasn't a revolution, which normally is not a very peaceful thing, I only saw people shouting on the streets for their ideal world, which is not a bad thing, but not a very useful one either. That's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If it is the case, please drop a like. You can also subscribe to the channel. And except for that, yes, you can also write a comment. I see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.